Welcome to BIV Today, the daily podcast from the newsroom of business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. You know, the fear was when COVID struck the economy, when people began to work from home a bit more and employers realized it was actually technically feasible to do so, that the commercial real estate market was going to somehow crater, that suddenly leases would be voided and people would walk away from buildings in a hurry. But that, of course, that hasn't really happened. But it is undergoing change as a market. And today I want to look at these changes and challenges with two guests from BlueShore Financial. Andy Wu is General Manager of Business and Wealth, and Anna Plut is a Business Advisor at BlueShore. Good to have you both.
Thank you for having us.
Listen, let's start with you, Anna. I mean, the pandemic effects were, immediately there were great fears, like that somehow real estate was going to fall apart, that people weren't going to be able to go into buildings to see what was going to be available. There was a whole bunch of worry, and it hasn't borne out. But still, there were some mistakes made along the way. Where have the mistakes been made in the handling during the pandemic of the commercial market?
I just have two clients I was kind of thinking about, and with everybody working from home, one client, for example, was looking to see if they can, sublease their space, and looking at their lease agreement, they could, but there was a cap on who they could lease it to. And, because some landlords don't want to have two accounting firms or two lawyers in the same building. So unfortunately, they had to let go of the building.
So it was a management of the almost like the population of a particular building, and you had a bit of a scramble going on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
With musical chairs almost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Andy, as you saw it, like where did people have an expectation that wasn't borne out, or something that weren't expected that arrived? What were the things that surprised people, do you think?
I think it had to do with more the contracts that were written pre-COVID. And of course, nobody was able to foresee this happening and the whole kerfuffle afterwards. But some of the tenants that got locked into longer-term contracts, and then subsequently their business had to scale back. I couldn't call that a mistake, but again, it just had to do with the effect of the pandemic all of a sudden just springing up.
Yeah. Are we starting to see a kind of a firming up of all of this, Anna, where people's fears were raised or expectations were raised or lowered, and now here we are 2+ years in, and there's a settling in of it all? Can you sort of see a stabilization of things now?
A little bit. There is still, the employees wanting to work from home, and employers having to accommodate that, and that also gives you the option of, do we keep the space that we're in? Do we move into a new space?
Yeah. And when it comes to inventory out there, is there a significant amount of inventory, or are people still picking over a pretty skeletal offering out there? Yeah.
There's definitely a shortage.
Yeah.
Shortage of supplies, and I see that with most of my clients.
Yeah. Andy, when there is a shortage of supply like that, you can see pretty significant price elevations if you're not careful. But, and has that started to occur?
Yes, and pretty broad-based too. Although the only exception, I think, is more of retail space, because a lot of retailers, unfortunately, again, their business either downsized or had to move, or just completely shut down. So retail space, I see a lot more inventory than, say, commercial industry space or warehouse space. And that's where we see the most increase as well, especially light warehousing.
Oh.
Yes.
And with Anna, with all of this, a fair number of businesses probably initially, when they started to see that many of their employees could work at home, may have had to do a little bit of a reconsideration of how much space they had. And yet, from what I can detect, there isn't this reforming of the office space. There isn't a smaller scaling. There's nothing terribly profound that way taking place. Has it turned out to the point where people are just saying, we need to stay put. This is not the time to kind of take our business and cut it in half?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's two options, I guess not two options, two problems when you do move into a bigger space, right? I mean, some of my clients have priced themselves out and they can't get a place, and other ones there's no vacancy. And even like Andy said, when retail space, I mean, the dental offices are looking for the same retail space that the restaurants are. And you have, daycares wanting that space as well, right? And daycares are finding it even harder because now they have to bring that space up to code.
Yeah. When you look at the lower mainland market in all of this, and what kind of advice you have to give people about location or about financing and things like that, would you characterize it, Andy, as still something that is a pretty acute shortage that isn't going to necessarily be met in the near term because of the kind of pace of supply that's emerging?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And Kyle, I would add that with residences, I know we are quite picky about where we live ourselves. We want to be at the center where everything's kind of convenient and things like that. I think it's more so with businesses. Mm-hmm. And the location is key. And that's where prime locations, as we were saying before, the prices have shot through the roof. And otherwise, again, with the shortage of available spaces, it's really incumbent on the businesses to assess where they want to be at and have a balance between a good location versus the location where all their workers can conveniently go to be able to attract workers as well.
Anna, are we seeing businesses, when they do relocating near where their workers actually live?
I mean, they'd like to be, close to their clients and close to their employees, but sometimes it's not possible for their employees to be in the same location as their clients. So transportation is definitely key. So I see clients moving into a location that is closer to their clients, but also along the major routes so that their employees can get there with ease.
Let's talk a bit about some of the markets that are here, though, Andy, in the Lower Mainland, and what some of their strengths and weaknesses are. I mean, Vancouver would be perceived, I guess, as a prime location. However, it is bound to be the most expensive, and as you put it, the prime space is escalating in terms of price all the time. Is there are there other parts of the Lower Mainland where the price point is becoming actually a little prohibitive for people?
Mm-hmm. A little bit of that depends on the type of business, obviously, but we feel that the North Shore is another area where it's considered prime location, so that the prices there are, again, just skyrocketing. There are hubs in Burnaby where, say, the Metrotown area, again, another prime area location where everybody wants to get in there and be a piece of that market action.
Yeah. Anna, when you take a look at not just the determination of owners and what it is they want for their property, but then the other types of things that are occurring, for instance, raising of interest rates. We're getting it seems like every 3-4 weeks now we're getting a bit of a bump up, and we expect that there's going to be more of a bump up. How much is that proving to be a bit of a factor now in terms of what people want to do with their leasing, and whether they want a different kind of arrangement, different size space, something that they feel they can handle in a different way because the owner is moving in with say inflationary increases?
I mean, with the rates going up, I have a couple of clients that said it affects their cash flow now, and they can't do the renovations they wanted to do. If they do the renovations, that it can increase the rent for their tenants, and that will just have to be put on hold.
But it still is a bit of an owner's market. The owners are not necessarily capitulating on renovations in the way that they might have been. If we recall, Andy, we were at the beginning of 2020 kind of thinking that we were moving into something like a recession, where perhaps there was going to be a bit of budging on that kind of thing, where it would be more of a leaseholder's market.
That's what we thought at the beginning of 2020. Well, from 2021 even, sort of that height of the pandemic came in through 2022. Although, like we just mentioned, it hasn't really come about as we expected up to this point. Yes, we do see some prices going up in terms of leases. Property has also gone up. Inflation is the big story, obviously. But having said that, we still haven't seen that recession come about yet.
Yeah, yeah. Are you concerned that one is headed our way, though?
There are certainly headwinds to that. Inflation, again, keeps on rising. It's not as fast as Q1, but Q2 still showed increases in inflation, and hence the rate keeps creeping up in trying to combat that.
Yeah.
Supply chain issues are another big thing. If we can't get the goods at a reasonable price, then everything kind of goes up.
Yeah. Yeah. Anna, let's talk a bit about also some different conversations now that are taking place during the pandemic. EDI is a major conversation that we weren't having to the same degree pre-pandemic. It has really we've had a pretty significant awakening, I think, around a lot of these issues. Can you translate that into how it's having an impact on things like commercial real estate?
Diversity is absolutely in everyone's mind because it drives innovation in business. And with diversity, you have to look at who's in your workplace and how to accommodate, and be that flexible hours, be that working from home. So the more flexibility you are able to give your employees, you can attract more employees.
And does that mean, for instance, that certain places are having more flexible schedules, longer opening hours, things that more people perhaps working in off hours than in typical 9 to 5 hours, those kinds of things, in order to have that flexibility, a flexibility that has arisen by virtue of trying to have a more inclusive workforce?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you're raising a family and you're trying to get, that demographic into your workplace, then absolutely you have to work with the flexible hours.
Yeah. What I also wonder about, Andy, is the complexity of all these factors for small businesses. Small businesses, as we all know, make up the vast majority of the businesses we have, and we've got well over 1 million people in them, even in the province of British Columbia. Have they had peculiar or particular impacts during the pandemic, you think, on how it is that they've been able to buy and lease space?
Particular impacts. Once again, I think it really depends on the type of businesses. Mm-hmm. There are certainly, say, the hospitality industry suffered as a whole through the pandemic, so they had to really shift their focus sometimes and offer different types of either delivery services, and that's where luckily the people like Uber Eats, they came about and provided a delivery service for those businesses to keep them running. Other businesses, such as the ones that can adapt right away to use more technology or to become a little bit more remote in their delivery, was, I guess, positively impacted throughout the pandemic, and that was really good.
Yeah, we spent our time so far talking about conditions and impacts and influences and all that, but I want to talk about now the advice that you're providing prospective clients, or those that actually have as clients that you want to expand your business or continue it with. And I would like to get a bit of a sense from each of you about the kind of a checklist that you try to walk people through in order to see that they're getting the best possible investment in their space and the best possible climate for the growth of their operations and the strongest possible conditions and all that. So where do you start with people, Anna, when they're coming to you, and what are some of the first questions you ask them in order to start sussing that out?
Well, I always say, when was the last time you assessed your production, right? Production. I mean, I'm going to use an example. Say you're a cafe. Have you looked at what suppliers you have, what you're buying, and just assess, maybe that's something I can be making in a house. Well, sure, I can make it in a house, but who's going to make it? Do I have employees that can make it? and say, would you be hiring a chef to make all, the sauces and the ketchups and things and making it in-house, right? Or, and how long that process is going to take. And you look at the difference of cost, whether you hire a chef or whether you buy already pre-made.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I also say, something like that needs to be looked at, annually.
Yeah. Andy?
Yes, if I may add to that too. I know, Anna, you were talking about a different strategy that one I've never heard before yet, but I believe one of the people you were talking to also rented out storage space for an off-site storage facility for their business, and therefore their main business did not have to be as big as they really needed to be, and still have enough storage space to access as well.
Yeah, and so you end up with the space that you're paying a premium for as small as possible, isn't that?
Oh,
part
absolutely.
of the thing?
And in your storage space, these are seasonal items that can go in there, and also your overflow of inventory and clutter as well. But that opens up space for the new employee to work comfortably.
And in your financial planning with them and with the services that you're providing, and that a lot of small businesses and medium-sized businesses, of course, can avail themselves of, does it come down to, do you get right into the weeds in terms of what their cash flow looks like, and what in a way they, how it is that you can help them manage their operations so that they don't, walk into something that's problematic for them?
Well, ideally that would be the case, but I would usually go and do a site visit and get to know my clients better, and just to see what their comfort level is, and some things that they don't want to change for their business just because of legacy, but definitely the cash flow. Ask them how many staff they need, and sometimes they say I'm looking for 2 staff, but really they're only looking for 1, and 1 in the future 2-3 years. Well, maybe just wait for 2-3 years to hire, but just hire essentially what you need, and also cross training and. It's also an option.
There were some incredible things, Andy, that businesses had to do when the pandemic struck in order to just frankly keep the lights on, if you want to call it that. Again, are you noticing that their adaptation has turned into some permanent things, the way in which they're going to operate now, and that maybe has created a different climate for how these businesses operated and the work that you will end up doing with them?
Yes, and incredibly so. Technology plays a huge part into it, of course. I even look in our industry where even pre-pandemic, a lot of people went into the branches for a lot of things and still do. However, with more technology and more available resources into those types of technologies, things like mobile banking has become huge in our sector. And there's a lot of things now that we can do, not so much in person, but at least over, say, a Skype call or email and things like that.
So for a smaller business, it sounds like it accelerated technology, right?
Oh, absolutely. And even, if my client is, not feeling well and we're uncomfortable to come into the office, we still have Skype. We don't have to cancel the meeting. Yeah.
And around things like inventory and supply chain issues and things like that had been a little less rigidly done in the past. Now people have to pay a lot closer attention to that, right, Andy, because of the disruption to the chain.
Yes. Again, the supply chain issues are creating huge inventory issues in terms of even getting supplies sometimes, or where they're coming from. They might have to consider using other suppliers that they never considered before. Yeah, and that always comes at a little bit of maybe a premium in terms of price.
In terms of buying either locally rather than some kind of globalized circuit on this or whatever. Would you expect that that's where, though, for safety's sake, businesses are going to start spending a little bit more attention on local supplies of things, just in order to make sure that they have some security about what they need?
Absolutely, and I definitely want to see that happen. I mean, definitely support the local businesses.
Yeah, it has an effect. Yeah, you have to wonder, I guess, about whether we're going to return to that old style just-in-time inventory.
Right.
because it doesn't look like it's all that predictable and secure any longer.
Yes, we've even seen businesses start more, actually. The trend actually started before the pandemic, but more and more, I see businesses that order upon the sale. So somebody would put an order in for an item, and then the company will go and order that item.
Yeah, that's obviously, that's kind of the way the furniture business operated for a very long time.
Yes.
And now I think it's sprawled out to a lot of other ones. Let's conclude the talk with a bit of a look at what you think the conditions might look like over the next year or so, in this area. I mean, your clients likely have questions at all times. What's the future holding? What are we going to see in the way of an economy? What are we going to see in the way of other types of conditions? We have no idea about what the health condition will be like, but about the economy. What kinds of questions are you being asked, Anna, and what are you able to tell people?
Well, I think first of all, with interest rates, always, to not to overextend yourself and always kind of have a buffer. I think a lot of my clients are still focused on getting the staff and retaining the staff. So we do have a lot of conversations about bonuses and perks and dental, medical coverage and things like that.
Yeah.
And what else the bank can assist with.
It sounds like small
businesses
businesses having to accommodate some of the things that larger businesses have had to in terms of benefits and monetary and non-monetary compensation for employees. Yeah, Andy, what kind of advice and areas are you now coming upon?
Well, I think a lot of businesses have been asking, sort of where do they go from here? And one thing I tell people is to really take a look at their business from start to finish, like their operations, where inputs are coming from, where the outputs are going, and take a look at where they were before the pandemic, how they adjusted through the pandemic, what things they can take after the pandemic and keep on going with it. And always, I would really say to talk to their business advisor throughout the process so that they can get a handle on the financial side through all this too.
Yeah. It's been a good conversation. I really learned a lot, and I think you're providing some really great insights into some of the challenges for small businesses. I want to thank you both for your time today, Anna Plut and Andy Wu. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
From BlueShore. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief at Business in Vancouver. Thanks a lot for watching.